For 3 years, this garden was his peace. Every morning, he would come outside. He would check on his plants. He felt proud of the food he grew. His little piece of earth was happy and alive. Then, work called him away. He had to travel for 5 days. He asked his neighbor, Mr. Clark, to water the plants. He was not worried. He said goodbye to his garden and left. The peaceful music stops abruptly. The video cuts to a bright, sunny day. We see him standing still at the edge of his property. His back is to the camera. We see what he sees. 5 days later, he returned home. He was tired from his trip. He walked towards his backyard, thinking about his tomatoes. He was ready to pick a few for dinner. But what he saw made his heart stop. The camera pans slowly across the scene. The vibrant garden is gone. In its place is only flat, brown, dug-up soil. It looks like a desert. A few broken stems are the only proof a garden was ever there. There is complete silence for 10 seconds. He could not believe his eyes. He blinked, thinking he was seeing things. But the empty plot was real. His hands, which had carefully planted every seed, felt suddenly empty. A cold feeling spread in his chest. This was not a mistake. Someone did this on purpose. He saw a piece of paper stuck to his back door. It fluttered in the wind. His fingers were shaky as he took it down. It was a notice from the Homeowners Association, the HOA. The words were cold and official. It said, "Unauthorized landscaping removed for violation of Community Rule 12B. Property must be kept to approved standards." The paper fell from his hand. Unauthorized? He had gotten verbal approval for the garden beds years ago. Removed? They didn't just trim it. They destroyed it completely. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Clark, the neighbor who was watering. "Saw the HOA team here yesterday. Karen from lot number 42 was with them, pointing at your yard. Looked like she was in charge. I'm so sorry, I didn't know what to do." The camera focuses on his face. His expression changes from shock to understanding, then to a quiet anger. Karen. He knew her. She lived 2 houses down. She always had a complaint. His fence was the wrong shade. His car was parked too long on the street. She was on the HOA board, and she had never liked his messy garden. Now he understood. This was not just the HOA. This was Karen. She used her power. She waited for him to be away, and she ordered the destruction of something he loved. He walked over the rough soil. His feet sank into the loose dirt. He picked up a broken piece of a green tomato, torn before its time. He felt a deep sadness. But underneath the sadness, a fire started. This was wrong. This was his home. This was his property. He looked at the neat, plain lawn of Karen's house. It was perfect and boring. No life, no color, just green grass. He went inside. He sat at his kitchen table, the empty plot visible from the window. The notice lay in front of him. He took a deep breath. He was just one person. She had the HOA behind her. But he had the truth. He had the before pictures on his phone. He had Mr. Clark as a witness. He had the feeling that a big injustice had happened. What could he do? Could he fight this? The question hung in the quiet room. The video ends with a final shot of the empty garden from his window. The narrator's voice returns, calm but firm. He had the evidence. He had the name. But what can one man do against a powerful neighbor and the rules she hides behind? This was only the beginning of the story. For a whole night, he thought about what to do. He looked at the ruined soil. Anger wanted him to shout, but he knew shouting would not help. He needed to hear it from her directly. He needed to see her eyes when she explained. The next morning, he decided. He would go to her house. He would ask one simple question: why? The camera follows his feet walking on the sidewalk. The sound of his footsteps is loud. His hands are in his pockets. We see Karen's house coming closer. It looks perfect, with no single leaf out of place. His heart beat fast. He was not a confrontational person, but this was too much. He reached her door and took another deep breath. He rang the bell. After a moment, the door opened. Karen stood there. She wore neat gardening gloves and held a small, expensive-looking potted plant. She looked at him, and her smile was thin. It did not reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was polite but cold. He kept his voice calm. "Karen, my garden. The HOA notice says you were there when they removed it." Her expression did not change. "Oh, that," she said, as if talking about a minor cleanup. "Yes, of course I was there. As a board member, I have to enforce our community standards. But it was my garden. I got approval for it years ago." She shook her head slowly. A verbal approval from a previous board member is not in the official records. The current board reviewed it. We decided it violated the aesthetic rules. It was an eyesore. The camera focuses on his face. The word eyesore hits him like a physical thing. He remembers the colors, the life, the food. An eyesore, he repeated. It was vegetables and flowers. It was messy, she stated, her voice becoming sharper. It looked wild. It did not match our beautiful community. It lowered everyone's property value. He could not believe what he was hearing. You destroyed it completely. You didn't even tell me. You waited until I was gone. Procedure, she said simply, adjusting her gloves. The notice was posted. It's not my fault you weren't here to see it. The rules are the rules. We all have to follow them. He saw it then. In her eyes. It wasn't just about rules. There was a glint of satisfaction. She enjoyed this power. She liked that his unique, lively garden was gone, and her uniform, controlled world remained. He tried one more time. There was food growing there. My food. Then you can buy food at the supermarket, like a normal person, she replied. She looked past him, towards his yard. Now it's clean. Now it's proper. You should be thanking us. A moment of silence hangs between them. He realizes there is no apology here. No regret. She was not just following rules. She was enforcing her own taste, her own need for control. Thanking you, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Yes, she said, missing the disbelief in his tone. It's for the best. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have my own gardening to do. She gestured with her perfect little potted plant. He just nodded. He had his answer. He turned and walked away. He could feel her watching him from the doorway until he reached his own property. Back in his kitchen, he looks out at the empty plot again. The encounter plays in his head. Her words, eyesore, procedure, supermarket. The calm feeling he fought to keep was gone. Now he felt a new determination. He sat down at his laptop. If the HOA rules were her weapon, he needed a bigger one. He started to search. He typed slowly. Homeowner rights against HOA. Can HOA destroy property? State laws for garden removal. For hours, he read. He found stories of other people in similar fights. He found forums full of frustration. But then, he found something else. He found a page from the state government website. It talked about homeowner protection and landscaping rights. His eyes scanned the legal words. One phrase stood out. Arbitrary destruction of established, non-harmful landscaping may be a violation of state property codes. His heart beat faster. This was it. This was the key. This wasn't just a fight with Karen anymore. This was about a wrong that broke a bigger law. He looked from his screen to the empty garden. The sadness was still there. But now, it was mixed with a spark of hope. Karen thought her HOA rules were the final word. She never imagined he would look for a higher authority. The video ends with a close-up of the state website on his laptop screen. The narrator's voice is steady. She had the rulebook. She had the board. She thought she won. But he just found a new page in a much bigger book. And he was about to start writing a different ending. That one line of text became his world. Arbitrary destruction of established, non-harmful landscaping. For days, he lived in a strange space between hope and doubt. He printed the state's property codes. The papers covered his kitchen table, a paper garden replacing his real one. He read the same sentences again and again. The law was clear. The HOA had a right to make rules, but they did not have the right to destroy property without notice and a proper hearing. What they did was arbitrary. It was a word that meant random and unfair. But a law on a website was just words. He needed to make it real. He needed to file a complaint. A formal one. The camera shows him assembling a file. It is not just papers. It is his story. He started with photos. He printed the beautiful before pictures, the red tomatoes, the sunflowers, the neat rows of lettuce. He placed them next to the after pictures of bare dirt. The difference was a punch to the heart, even on paper. Next, he added the HOA's notice. He highlighted the words, removed for violation, and must be kept to approved standards. Then, he wrote his own statement. He wrote in simple, clear sentences. He explained the garden's history. He wrote about his trip. He wrote about coming home to destruction. He described his talk with Karen, quoting her words, "It was an eyesore." He included Mr. Clark's text message, printed out. He wrote down the date and time of everything. He was building a wall of facts. But doubt whispered to him, "You're just one person. The state is big. They won't care about a small garden." He pushed the voice away. The law was the law. Size didn't matter. The final step was the hardest. He had to name the responsible party. He wrote, "The action was instigated and supervised by HOA board member Karen, last name, of address." Putting her name and address on an official state form felt like a big step, a point of no return. We see him at the post office. He holds a thick, brown envelope. It feels heavy in his hands. It holds all his evidence, all his hope. He stood at the mailbox for a long minute. Once he dropped this in, there was no taking it back. He was not just complaining to the HOA anymore. He was inviting the state into his fight. He thought of Karen's confident smile. She thought the fight was over. She had no idea a new opponent had just entered the ring. He let the envelope go. It fell into the dark slot with a soft thud. Back home, the waiting began. The video shows the passage of time. A calendar with days crossed off, the sun rising and setting outside his window, the empty plot staring back. Life went on, but everything felt paused. Karen was outside often, tending to her perfect lawn. She would look over at his barren yard and give a small, satisfied nod. She believed she had taught him a lesson. She believed she had won. He didn't approach her. He didn't say a word. The power was no longer in talking. The power was in the process he had started. It was out of his hands now. He would check his mailbox every day, his heart jumping. But there was only junk mail and bills. Silence from the state. Weeks passed. The fire of his determination began to cool, replaced by a cold, hard patience. He started to clear the broken stems from the soil. It was not to give up. It was to prepare the ground. He didn't know what would happen, but he wanted to be ready for anything. The video ends with him standing at the edge of the empty plot, a single shovel stuck in the earth beside him. He looks at Karen's house, then down at the soil. He had played his move. He followed the state's rulebook. Now he had to wait. And in that quiet neighborhood, under the same sun, two people lived in two different worlds. One thought the game was finished. The other knew the most important player hadn't even made a move yet. The wait was the hardest part. After sending the complaint, every day was the same. He would wake up, look at the empty ground, and feel the quiet. It was a heavy quiet, full of questions with no answers. He followed his normal routine, work, meals, errands. But everything felt like he was moving underwater, slow and muted. Karen, however, seemed to move with more energy than ever. She was always outside, watering, pruning, sweeping her spotless driveway. Her actions were like messages sent without words. See? This is order. This is how things should be. We see a series of short clips, like surveillance footage from his window. Karen points at a single weed in a neighbor's yard. Karen chats with another HOA board member, both looking towards his property and shaking their heads. He avoided her. When he saw her in the distance, he would turn and walk the other way. This wasn't out of fear. It was strategy. He gave her nothing. No anger to feed on, no questions to answer. To her, his silence must have looked like surrender. He could see it in the way she held her head higher. But he was not idle. His waiting had a purpose. He began to research what a fine from the state could actually mean. He learned it wasn't just a slap on the wrist. For an HOA, a state fine meant a formal violation on their record. It could affect them for years. And if an individual was found to have acted in bad faith, like using their position for a personal grudge, they could be held personally responsible. The fine could land directly in their lap. He allowed himself, for the first time, to imagine it. Not the money, but the moment. The moment Karen's perfect understanding of her own power shattered. One afternoon, a break in the routine. His phone buzzed. It was Mr. Clark, the neighbor. The text was simple. "You around? Something interesting just happened." He met Mr. Clark at the property line. Mr. Clark spoke in a low voice, his eyes glancing down the street. "Saw the mail truck stop at her house about 20 minutes ago," he said. She got a large, official-looking envelope. Thick. Had some kind of government logo in the corner. He felt his pulse quicken, and she took it inside. But about 5 minutes ago, she came back out to her mailbox. Mr. Clark continued. She was just standing there, holding the opened envelope, staring at the papers inside. I've never seen a person's face change color like that. She went white, then bright red. A small, quiet bird landed on the barren soil between them, pecked at nothing, and flew away. "What did she do then?" he asked. "She looked right at your house," Mr. Clark said, his voice a mix of awe and unease. "Then she just went back inside, real fast. Closed the door. didn't even check her roses. He thanked Mr. Clark and walked back to his own door. He didn't look at Karen's house. He didn't need to. The image was in his mind. Her standing frozen, the color draining from her face, the unreadable government letter in her hand. He sat at his kitchen table, the same place he had assembled his complaint weeks ago. The quiet in his house was different now. It was no longer heavy with doubt. It was electric with anticipation. The storm he had been waiting for had finally made landfall. He just hadn't heard the thunder yet. He didn't celebrate. He felt a strange calm. This was the consequence of her actions, traveling through official channels and arriving right on her doorstep. It was real now. The rest of the day, the street was unusually still. No Karen. No sprinklers. Her house looked like a painted set, perfect and completely empty. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the 2 yards, one meticulously alive, one purposefully dead, he realized something. The waiting was over. A new phase was beginning. The next move was no longer his, and it was no longer the state's. The next move was hers. The video ends with a slow zoom on Karen's front door, now closed tight against the evening. The narrator's voice is a soft, steady whisper. For weeks, the battle was invisible, fought with paperwork and patience. But today, the war came home, and it knocked on her door first. The silence on the street wasn't peace. It was the breath everyone holds before the world turns. He had been expecting it. Ever since Mr. Clark's text the day before, he knew the quiet would break. He walked to the door and opened it. Karen stood there. But it was not the Karen from before. The woman who had called his garden an eyesore was gone. In her place stood someone smaller, older. Her shoulders were slumped. In her hands, she clutched a few sheets of paper. Her knuckles were white. She didn't meet his eyes. She stared at his doormat. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of all its sharp confidence. He didn't say anything. He simply stepped back and held the door open. She walked in, the official papers rustling in her shaky grip. They stand in his living room. He does not offer her a seat. The camera stays on her, on the way she seems to be collapsing in on herself. "This came," she said, thrusting the papers toward him. He took them. It was a letter from the State Department of Property Codes. He scanned it. The language was dry, legal, and devastating. The state had found in his favor. The HOA's action was deemed arbitrary, capricious, and in violation of Section 12.7.3. But that wasn't the main point. He looked further down. His eyes found the paragraph. Fines assessed for the violation are the direct responsibility of the HOA. Furthermore, due to evidence of bad faith and misuse of position, a supplementary personal penalty is levied against the instigating board member, Karen, last name, for the full cost of restoration and associated damages. There was a number. It was a large number. A fine large enough to make anyone's breath catch. He looked up at her. Her face was pale. "A personal penalty," she whispered, as if saying the words made them more real. "They're saying I have to pay it. Me. Not the HOA. Me." He handed the letter back. He still said nothing. He let the weight of the state's words hang in the air between them. "I didn't know," she started, then stopped. Her excuses died before they were born. The state's letter didn't care what she knew. It only cared what she did. Then, the performance began. It was a pathetic show. Her eyes welled up with tears that didn't quite fall. "It was a misunderstanding," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "The board, we all agreed. It wasn't just me. I was just doing my job for the community." He listened. He watched the panic move through her like a fever. She was scrambling, trying to find the old Karen, the one with the authority and the rules. But that woman was gone, erased by the same bureaucratic power she had always hidden behind. "You have to help me," she said, finally looking at him, her eyes wide with desperation. "You can call them. You can tell them it was a mistake. You can withdraw the complaint." This was the moment. This was the revenge he had imagined in his darkest hours. But now that it was here, he felt no joy. He felt a cold, clean clarity. "No," he said. His voice was quiet but absolute. It was the first word he had spoken to her since she entered. She flinched as if struck. "You made your choice when you destroyed my garden while I was away," he continued. "You didn't talk to me. You didn't send a warning. You just erased it. The state has made their choice. This is between you and them now." The last of her composure shattered. The fake tears were replaced by a real, trembling fear. She saw no lifeline in his eyes. No mercy. She snatched the state's letter back from him. Without another word, she turned and almost ran out of his house, the door swinging shut behind her. He is left in the sudden quiet. He walks to the window. He sees her hurrying across her perfect lawn, the papers fluttering like a trapped bird in her hand. She fumbles with her keys, disappears inside, and her door closes hard. He looked down at his own hands. They were empty. But for the first time since he came home to dirt, they didn't feel that way. The victory was not sweet. It was sobering. He had used a bigger rulebook to beat her rulebook. He had won. But the garden was still gone. The soil was still bare. The state's letter was justice, but it was not restoration. It was an ending for her story, but not for his. The video ends with him turning away from the window, his back to the empty yard. The narrator's voice is reflective. The knock on the door had come. The reckoning was delivered. The bully had been out-bullied by the system she trusted. But a fine fixes a balance sheet, not a broken garden. And a man who has won his fight still has to face what was lost and decide what to build in its place. The letter from the state was final. The HOA, shaken by the fine and the official reprimand, sent a formal apology. They changed the vague rule. Now, it required written notice and a 30-day discussion before any alteration of property. Karen resigned from the board. She paid the fine. She became a ghost in her own home, her curtains always drawn. For him, the victory felt complete, yet hollow. He had a check from the HOA for estimated restoration, but money wasn't the point. The point was outside his window, a blank page of earth. One Saturday morning, he did a simple thing. He didn't plan it. He just took a rake and began to smooth the torn soil. The action was peaceful. He was not erasing the past. He was preparing for something new. As he works, a neighbor, Mrs. Gable from 3 doors down, approaches the fence. She's an older woman he only ever waved to. "I heard about what happened," she said, her voice soft. "I always liked your garden. It had character." She paused. "I have some extra marigold seeds. They're good for the soil. And for keeping some pests away." She placed a small, hand-labeled packet on the fence post and gave a knowing nod before walking away. He stared at the seeds. It was a small thing, but it was the first crack in the wall of silence that had surrounded the whole affair. The next day, Mr. Clark came over. He didn't bring seeds. He brought a 6-pack of lemonade and 2 shovels. "Thought you could use some help turning this earth," he said. No big speech. They just worked. A montage begins, set not to dramatic music, but to the quiet sounds of work: shovels and dirt, water from a hose, a bag of soil being ripped open. Something was happening, but it wasn't just about plants. It was about the street. The story of the state's fine had spread, not as gossip, but as a quiet lesson. People who had felt small under Karen's scrutiny saw a different ending was possible. A young couple, new to the neighborhood, dropped off a small blueberry bush. A housewarming gift for the new garden, they smiled. Another neighbor, a busy father, left a bag of rich compost on the driveway with a sticky note, "From our bin. Hope it helps." He did not design this new garden. He curated it. He planted Mrs. Gable's marigolds as a border. He put the blueberry bush in a sunny corner. He built a simple trellis for beans, a gift from another neighbor. It was not his garden alone anymore. It was a community's. The final shots are time-lapse. Green shoots break through the dark soil. Leaves unfurl. Flowers bloom in a riot of color that is deliberately, joyfully unmatched. The garden is fuller, wilder, and more beautiful than before. He sits on a small bench he built from reclaimed wood, watching bees dance among the blossoms. This garden has a story in every plant. It is not just a garden of food or flowers. It is a garden of consequence, of repaired connections, of small bravery. The camera pulls back, showing his vibrant, living space next to Karen's perfectly sterile, quiet yard. The contrast is the final, unspoken word. Narrator's voice, calm and sure. He learned that some people break beautiful things just to prove they can. You can fight them. You can use a bigger rulebook and win. But that victory only clears the ground. It doesn't plant the seeds. The real victory wasn't the fine or the apology. It was this. It was the understanding that when you stand up for what's right, you never stand alone for long. People see it. And sometimes, they will quietly bring you seeds. The old garden was taken by one person's bitterness. But this new one was built by a neighborhood's quiet hope. And what grows from hope is always stronger. Final shot is a bee landing on a bright sunflower, then lifting off, carrying its pollen out into the world. Fade to black.